And so I suppose the process of identifying identity through art is a good way for me to get at some of those emotions that I don't always share.
Meeting new people and having new experiences, I think that others have been a very important part of shaping my own personal identity.
I actually wanted to be a little boy when I was younger, and I think Elizabeth Gilbert said this once, and I was like, oh yeah, she got it, because it wasn't that was my identity, that I was transgender or needed to be a man. It was, I like the way they live. I like that they get to do that.
It was a chaotic time. I'm Jewish. My family was Jewish. My father was conscripted by the Soviets, and we never heard from him again. And so it was my mother, my sister, and I who survived the war miraculously.
Like, I have an idea about what I'm interested in and my persona and my attitude and all that, but like at the end of the day, I really don't know who I am.
I can do everything I want to show the world who I am, but then it's up to the world to then understand that, and I don't think that always happens.
So that's where you have to really attempt the pursuit of finding who you are. Who are you and where do you come from?
I think there's a theory about the age of 2 to 5, something about when that age, that era, if you think about it, you are being taken care of. You are inside of a family, and you don't really have a lot of choice in where you live, where you go, how you put food on the table. And so when we're younger, up until the formative years, I don't think we have a lot of control in shaping our identity. I think we're born into it. It's that idea of, I'm going to get spiritual here, your soul chooses the family you get born into to work out your karma from a previous life, and so you, in that aspect, you do have control in shaping your identity because your soul chooses the family that you're going to be born into.
So I think there's layers of identity, and I think there's a layer of identity that you do have control over. But I also think there's a layer of identity that I would think more as your soul, that you don't have. You are who you are, and there are things you can change about it, but there's also things you have to just accept.
And I decided a long time ago who I wanted to be, and yet every encounter contributes something. Sometimes it's a struggle, like this era is a struggle because of the right-wing shift and stuff like that. But we have to live through it. We have to kind of somehow maintain our identities, and I think I've always been kind of stubborn about, even kind of as a child.
I can't say that we have much control at all because, we're existing in the world, we're interacting with friends, family, random people, and all of that kind of colors our experience. We just don't live in isolation. So, I could be driving down the street, see something really interesting, and that might spark an idea for a painting or you know, listening to music or listening to NPR or whatever, or hear a cool story. So yeah, we just exist in this big soup, and we're always being kind of changed by it.
I can control parts of how I present myself to the world and what I want people to see. Because there's parts of me that I don't want people to see. And I choose to not let them out, you know, and I choose to, you know, show people the best parts of me and the parts that I'm most proud of. And so I think that we do have kind of that control over, you know, how we present ourselves to the world.
Control, yeah. Things I'd like to control and things I can't control. And I do think a lot of the art process I don't control. That I've come to believe, and of course my training as an undergrad too, and I kind of got into it before I realized it, but was always dealing with the Jungian creative unconscious. And make a long story short, I really feel like I'm a portal, right? I'm just a portal here, opening up. If I overthink it too much, or think and think and think, what am I going to do? It becomes dead and boring, and it just kind of falls flat in its face. So, you know, as of late especially, I've been really kind of looking at dream work and the things that kind of get thrown out at me. And sometimes I fully illustrate it, sometimes not, right? But it doesn't matter.
How do you control your identity? Your identity is you. The shaping of it may happen as a child, learning how to draw or paint, and becoming an artist, where people identify with you as an artist. You're an artist. You make art, and when you're a child, you're different than the other kids. Everybody might be in art class, but not everybody enjoys it, does it, or takes it serious. So it's becomes something you're recognized by. That's like who you are.
You know, when I was younger, the one thing that I wanted to find was to give my children one father, one house, one town. You know, I did not really have that because this horrible divorce when I was about 9 years old from my parents, which I look back at it was a good thing, but it was a lot of turmoil at that stage, which I think I always go back. That's my well. That really is the well of suffering, and that's what always keeps coming out, the journey and the collision. So my husband, for me, you know, has just helped me become the person that I need to be, because he has been an extraordinary father and all that. So we've you know, done really well together. And of course my children has shaped me more than I care to admit sometimes, and now that they're grown and they're gone per se, but I think they showed me how selfish and unselfish I can become.
My dad's side of the family is, he's got a big family. He's got 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and his grandparents, or his parents, my grandparents, they all lived really close by. And so they'd get together a lot for family dinners and things like that. It was very, very common. So we spent a lot of time there. And his family didn't play games. They didn't, not much. They didn't sit and watch movies. They would sit in a room and just talk about things. And sometimes it got pretty heated, and sometimes it was fairly often funny. But the serious moments, they were talking about real things. And so we grew up, my siblings and I, we grew up with this like McLaughlin Report style family where there was a CNN roundtable discussion going on in the living room during most family gatherings. And so that's how I approach all of my issues too, is that things are a conversation. And it's okay to be in disagreement as long as it lacks animosity. So that's the model that's our model, that's my family's model, and that's kind of what I'm used to. But it does produce, not only does it produce good conversations, it also produces beliefs, which is, I think, I don't think they had any intention of being impactful on the grandkids, but I think they did, and just because of who they were. And I think we owe them a debt, and I think they know this, but maybe they don't. We owe them a debt because of how the grandkids, myself included, think about issues of importance.
And I was fortunate, I always, I can't say I made art, but I didn't know what art was, but I always scribbled, drew, made things. I had this knack for this impulses to make things, and people would laugh, oh, the little artist and stuff like that. But then at one point in my teens, my sister had a friend who had gone to the High School of Music and Art, and she suggested maybe I would want to go. Apply. It wasn't so easy to say you'll go. And so I worked on a portfolio of drawings and things. I don't remember exactly what they were, and I got accepted, which was one of the most fortunate things in my life. We were treated like artists, and it was from there that, and also being the late 50s, which was a very conservative time where girls were wearing pink and boys were wearing, et cetera, et cetera. We, had our hair long and wore black and, went to jazz bars and, kind of smoked pot and stuff like that. And became different kinds of people, were allowed to become, what I've said on this website is that going to music and art encouraged me to become who I wanted to be.
I tell you, I've been teaching for 3 years now, and I think it's made me a better painter, a stronger artist, and more confident in my ability as a visual communicator than any class or workshop I ever took. As great as my teachers were, switching those roles around and then being confronted with a young person who wants you to give them all the answers right away. It's like, dude, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get all the answers right away. It's a process. It's time. It's commitment. You have to walk the road for a while, and then slowly but surely you start getting it.
I personally was really blessed. I had parents that were extremely supportive of my endeavors in theater and movement, and they drove me to rehearsals and they came to my performances. I was at the Minneapolis Children's Theater Company, and I was taking Afro-Caribbean dance, and it was like, bing! I love this. I love the community. I love the tradition. I love the drums. I love the ceremony. I love what my body and my soul is experiencing when I do African dance with a tribe. It was so powerful. And so because I enjoyed that, I chose to continue on with that. And I think that informed and was a part of creating. It was one of the experiences that has made me who I am today.
If your identity as a child progresses to being an artist, and people, oh, he's an artist, you're an artist, I can't draw a stick figure, and you continually work at it, you're kind of furthering yourself to where you want to be. It's just a different way of looking at the world. So if you think about what teachers say, or they can have this hypnotic quality of belief because it comes from a power of authority. So that's when thinking about the shaping, is when you have to decide, what is my identity? Where am I going with it?
Well, for me right now, in the last 18 months, I've become a mom, which has been exciting, terrifying, amazing, scary, hard, easy in so many ways that I can't even describe. And I've struggled a bit with the idea that, you know, I waited until I was in my mid-30s to have kids, and I'm really glad I did. But I think you're a little more set in your ways. So then this sort of major life change that happens to you, I think is maybe a little more traumatic than if you had done it earlier. Maybe that's not the case for everyone else, but I kind of felt like for me, maybe it was. And it's probably because I never, you know, I always saw myself as having kids, but I never felt like this dying need to have them. I'm amazingly glad I have her, and I don't regret it for a second, so that's not what I'm saying, but I just didn't know what that would be like, and I was scared of how it would change me. And I think I'm still working on figuring out who I am now. You know, for 40 weeks you share a body, and then you give birth, and for the last 9 months I'm nursing her, so I'm still sustaining her. So for 18 months my body sustained 2 people. And I think that for me, I felt a little lost in that, and sort of figuring out where do I exist with her? How does she exist with me? How do I exist with my husband and my family, and as an artist and as a teacher? And I've struggled with that, because I think for me, I was pretty. I'd kind of come to a place in my life I felt very comfortable, and then I kind of changed it all up again. So I think I'm still sort of figuring out what the new me is going to be, and not thinking about the old me, because I think it's just a new iteration of who I am. And it's something that I kind of go through days when that makes sense, and there's days when that doesn't make sense. And I don't know if other mothers feel that way, but I know for me that it's been hard. But I love her, and so I know that it's all for the best, and it's all great, and I'm happy to be with her and share this with my husband. Sorry. I'm an emotional mess. Oh my god, I'm a crier. In case you hadn't noticed. I'm like it might start getting emotional, crying. Oh, you're frustrated, crying. Oh, you're mad, crying.
In terms of like community, I think our community kind of builds us to, it kind of puts us together, and it, you can kind of start figuring out your place in a community, and where you kind of fit in and who you jive with, and but at the same time, I don't think they know who they are either. So I always think more art is better. More people coming together to appreciate art is awesome, and that's what I love about what Vartan has done here. Is he's created this really it's almost kind of disparate sometimes, but this great community of artists that are just coming together. We're working together. We're working on our own work. We're coexisting in a gallery space together. And that's really what is appealing to me about Four Elements and what Vartan is doing here.
I would love to say that we don't need to sacrifice who we are, but I think to some degree we do, because I think identity, there's a hierarchy, unquestionably, and I think, I have the luxury of a lot in my identity that I'm proud of and that I'm secure in, but there's parts of it that I'm not. But I think what we have to realize is that others also come to everything in that way, that we don't all come with this defined set of who we are every time and are comfortable with that. And so we have to understand that I could assert myself and I'm stepping on someone else. So potentially I have to temper that, and in doing that, I have to understand that maybe that's part of my identity that I have to change or alter in those situations to be understanding of other people.
Yeah, I think you just really have to know who you are. Know your values, know your ethics, know where you stand, and be open to listening and understanding other perspectives. I think we're at a time in history right now where we really need to be listening to each other. Not to agree, but just to listen and understand.
You're out in public, you're on a subway train. I can remember doing hundreds of drawings of people on the train where nobody acknowledges anybody. And then all of a sudden you're acknowledged because you're acknowledging someone else, but not in a personal manner, in a way that you're recording something, a moment, and observing them. And the innocent observation of drawing, people identify with that. You're doing something, you're drawing them. And you may never see that person again, but you have that drawing, unless you get rid of it.
Be vulnerable, which we always talked about, that you can be not always right about stuff, and even within your own tribe, to kind of be willing to stand up and say, I don't know if I agree with that a little bit. And I think that's what we all need to start working on more and more, I think more so after this whole election process and the things that we're going in and all the political divides that are going on right now. It's just to kind of be open. I think artists, we do that all the time, right? I mean, all of this is just like an unfolding. It's turning ourselves inside out, and we don't even get, I personally, I'll say, I don't even get what I'm doing half the time. I think I'm being pushed by something else, and some of it kind of doesn't work, and yes, it does work, and it doesn't work. But there's a story to be told, and I think if, for me, they're visual conversations. And if people can tell me what they're seeing in their work and what they're not seeing or how they're feeling, and hopefully we can kind of have that as a platform or as an avenue to talk with one another.
I guess I don't know if coming together as a community requires a sacrifice. I mean, I think that a community, if everybody's intentions are to be united, then I don't think that sacrifice is a precursor to success on that regard. So, but that's utopia. That's the ideal world. So how do you come together in a way? I think that you have to maybe give up some of your preconceived notions of who people are. And so, and maybe what you think of as your identity, or how you think other people see you, needs to be more flexible so that you're not sensitive to maybe misinterpretation. So if we're going to be united, if we're going to come together and we're going to be a community, a successful community, we need to be okay with people interpreting us in different ways. So you have to sacrifice your armor. You have to be more vulnerable. You have to be willing to be hurt. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. And maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But it seems like we are, when our backs are against the wall, we don't talk, we fight.
This other people that I got to know, the German film director and his wife, who I met through Servas. And I had rented a loft in Berlin from an artist, from a painter. And it was on the 7th floor of some industrial building. I was the only one in that building. And at night I had to walk up 7 flights of steel steps. But my friend Ulrich, my German friend, he said, don't worry, Berlin is a safe city. And I decided I would accept that. I didn't have a phone. It was before cell phones, and I didn't have a phone. I didn't have, But I decided not to be afraid, And anyway, I called up. I had to go to the phone booth on the to make phone calls, and I called up this German director, and he came and he got me, and he, came up to my loft, and he said, "Don't you want to come and stay with us?" And, and I said, no, because I wanted to have my own place. I had my own reality to come back to, so I wasn't always having to accommodate. I wanted to accommodate, but I also needed to come back to my own place.
It humbles you to all people, all walks of life. You have to have an understanding for many different people, many different personalities, cultures, music, dance, and different languages, where you open yourself up to being able to draw somebody who you can't communicate with if you're on a train and going through Italy. But you can draw them in the understanding of drawing. It's there. It's a drawing. You're drawing a person, or you're drawing the same observation that the person next to you sees, but you see it differently, or you see it your way. So what you're embracing is the possibility of creating more human connections. And that's something that I've found, that even through life, like, nonconformity in a natural way, not a nonconformity like anarchist, or it can even get you out of trouble, like getting the tough guys in class, and oh, you draw, wow, that's great. Wow. There's a certain respect for it where it disarms people. And yeah, when you see that person 20 years later and they, how's the art going? What are you making? What are you painting? So I think that what's at your disposal is like the openness to gaining more human connections, and having your art visible.
When I was trying to embrace my identity as an artist, I am an artist, and it was so easy to step away, and it was so hard to be this stay-at-home mother and to try to give all my children what they needed, and doing it right, and reading the books and trying to figure this out, because I feel as though I didn't really have that example at home, right? I wanted to do it differently, so anyway, I did all that. But also, too, I needed this identity to know that I am still a creative, viable human being, woman, and I just needed this. Art saved me from so much. So it was the kind of going back and forth of sometimes missing games, of sometimes being late, of not seeing them, all in all their glory, because mom was taking a drawing class or doing something like that. But in the end, I know it was worth it. I know, and they turned out just great. But anyway, I think that's that ultimate tension that you always have to kind of hold.
Pride. So I don't know who's going to see this and who's going to hear this, and I don't always talk about this stuff on a daily basis, right? What my identity is. So I guess what's at stake is vulnerability, right? So I could, I'm not the person that shares their emotions on a daily basis. I'm pretty tightly reined in, and I don't always express the emotions I'm feeling, positive, negative, high, low, in general. And so I suppose the process of identifying identity through art is a good way for me to get at some of those emotions that I don't always share. So that's at stake for me. So that's almost an anxiety to a certain extent, that people are going to know something about me which I didn't intend. Because I am that type A artist, and I do like to control what they see, what I produce, and that might not happen here. The control is kind of going out the window a little bit, which is a good thing. It's okay. I'm okay with that, but it's definitely at stake. In terms of what's at our disposal, I guess I don't really know what that means exactly. What am I willing to get rid of? Those two things seem like they might be kind of similar to me. So vulnerability is at stake, but also my protective layers is what I'm willing to dispose of. So that protection, that insulation from how people know me and what I want them to know, I guess I am willing to dispose of that to a certain extent in this process.
My intention when I perform is to transcend and to enter a portal. The observer, the witness, and to invite people into that experience. So when I am in that, I think that what I love about performing is that I get so lost in it. And then there are those moments, especially now that I'm doing more integration, where I'm weaving through people who are witnessing. I'm weaving through and I'm sharing things with them, and I'm really into physical contact lately. So I might make it part of my structured improvisation to actually lean on a person. And how they respond and the energy I get can then inform what happens next. So then there is that you do have to listen to understand. And to further illustrate, I don't necessarily have to agree. So someone might take that invitation of me making physical contact and want to go with it. And I'm like, I hear you, I understand you, but I'm not going to go there with you, so I'm going to break away and move on to this. Or it might be someone, they want to take it and go with it, but I'm sensing that the energy's great. There's a great connection. So yeah, I am going to go with this, and let's see where it leads.
I love it.
Well, you always have to be true to who you are, regardless. I mean, I think people can inherently pick out when you're, not being honest or true. I guess the only thing you have at stake is that vulnerability that I was talking about. Like, people seeing who you are, like what your interests are, like who you are as a person. And for some people, they want to hide that, and I never understood that really. I think to try to be something that you're inherently not is like it's a waste of your time.
That when we can be aware of ourselves, let our guard down a little bit in a space that's comfortable, we can actually see this happening, this sort of community building. I have lots of students who say that to me, and so I feel that projects like this are important because they're giving people the space, they're giving people the time. Tell your story, share your experiences, talk about yourselves, and I think it happens in the moments where we've let our guard down a little bit. I was just speaking with another artist, and it's a community where there's different houses, and artists can do residencies, and he said, the times when you really get to know people are the times when you're in the kitchen. And I said, absolutely, right. I mean, it's the same thing as making art, and he's a writer, so he doesn't necessarily have the collaborative studio experiences. But when you have those moments and you're kind of sharing the problem solving and you're in it, it's those small moments that you really get to know people, because they're not showing off for the world. They're not putting on their best face. They're sort of figuring things out, and that's uncomfortable. And those are the moments when I think you really see people's true colors.
I went to the dining car to have some coffee or something. The train was moving by then, and when I came back, there were two guys sitting at the window seat, and one of them had taken my seat, and there were these two Slovakian guys, I found out later, and they were very rowdy. They were playing music at full blast, kind of Slovakian rock music, and drinking beer and banging their beer bottles on the table, sort of being purposely obnoxious. And eventually we're also joined by these two other guys. There was 5 guys and me. And By the way, on my way back from the dining car to have a coffee, I decided to pop into the bathroom, and I had a little bit of a joint, and I had a couple of hits, which gave me a good perspective. You know, I just sort of looked at it all philosophically. I thought, well, this is not the right moment to ask for my feedback, you know. So what I did was I always pulled my camera out to have it there as a presence, right? And not necessarily, and often I would say, you know, at different times I would say, would you mind if I'm an American photographer, I'm doing a story about train travel, I didn't go into details that I'm a Jewish, you know, blah, 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 anything. And would you mind if in the course of this journey, I would take a couple of pictures? And then I would wait for the moment. But often I would start off by taking pictures, you know, of the ceilings or nothing in particular, just for them to see my camera in function, you know, and to hear it, and like this. And so I did something like that, but I would also start off I would engage in a conversation. They were playing this obnoxious music, and I kind of said, I would start off by saying, sprechen Sie Deutsch oder English? Do you speak German or English? And they, I believe, spoke English, or maybe some German, you know, it was sort of mixed. And I told them that I had some, you know, that if they're interested in American music, I had brought actually some music that's kind of a cultural exchange of, you know, sort of interesting music. And they said, oh, you want American music? We have American music. And they put on Michael Jackson, full blast, like really, really obnoxious. So yeah, and as I'm tapping my foot to the music, like I'm really enjoying this, and I'm starting a conversation with these guys, and I tell them that I'm an American photographer and I'm doing a story about train travel in Eastern Europe, and we get to talking, and they start telling me about life under communism. And the Russian guy all the time is intent on reading his book. He's obviously an art historian, because I looked over and the illustration wore these Russian icons, so something like that. And then there were two Hungarian guys who initially were really, you know, pissed off by this rowdiness because they were trying to sleep. But as I get into a conversation with the two Slovakians, and they start telling me about the hardships of communism and the surveillance and, you know, all this stuff, the Hungarians get into the story as well, and they start telling their story. So at a certain point, the two Hungarians who had been trying to sleep decided to enter the conversation, and they also had stories to tell about the era of, you know, communism and the surveillance and the control and, you know, the dangers and stuff like that. So little by little, we all, you know, kind of bonded. It wasn't that long a ride. It was about 3 to 5 hours ride between Budapest and Prague. And so at a certain point, we were pulling into the station, and one of the Slovak guys gave me his rosary. And that was I still have it. I lost, some of it got detached, but that was, you know, and when we got into the station, they got me a taxi and they paid for it. So that was, you know, that was sort of like real bonding. I mean, we really, yeah, it was okay.
I mean, I knew I was going to be an art teacher when I was, ironically, in 6th grade, because I had a great 6th grade art teacher who said we had the same conversation. So I will often share that with my students, that this is something I always knew I wanted to do. So, you know, if a 6th grader can decide they're going to be an art teacher and then it happens, I don't think a lot has changed in terms of who I'm a person, the way I foresee what my future is going to be. That's a pretty good example of how things go for me. I figure out what I want to do, and then chase it down and do it. And I think for the most part, that's still true. Which means I'm not particularly flexible. And that's always been hard for me to deal with when things change that I'm not prepared for. Never been good at that. And maybe I'm better now. I don't know. You'll have to ask somebody who knows me well enough to say, but I doubt it. I think different people come through your life that influence you in big ways. And sometimes it's a really huge influence for a very short period of time, and then it kind of dissipates. And or somebody you've known your whole life, all of a sudden you recognize how influential they have been, and you don't always know that. It was subtle enough, or you weren't aware that you were emulating them as much as you were. And so recognizing that is, I suppose, is a change in myself, the way I'm aware of myself, because you realize that you've been pulling from somebody's either personality or emotions for a very long time without knowing it. So sometimes those people come and go too, and sometimes they they're gone and they're not coming back, and that's an awareness that those certainly are difficult changes in your life. That certainly I can say have happened to me.
I guess I hesitate. What has stayed the same when I think so much has changed? Okay, but there's I always feel like there's one thread, and I guess that it is the art of always continuing, of trying to say that look at me. This is who I am. I think because of the divorce, I was the youngest of three. Very crazy time at that point, and I think, especially if a child of the 70s, and everyone was the first new divorces and all that, and we're all that collateral damage and just kind of forgot about it. And I think that's kind of how I felt, and I needed to find that identity, and I certainly didn't want to emulate what I saw before me, right? So I had to dig and dig and dig and keep through that. Always trying out, different things, wanting to find a different way. And again, thank goodness that I found certain people in my life, and I always felt that little guiding hand of, no, you want to go this way, that way, and it was always felt like it was my future self telling me which way to go, and learning how to play the right cards. So always just the identity of just trying to find a better way, a more meaningful way, and thank God I chose the right people. And I gotta say that I did choose. You can say people chose me, but I think I was, something again has always been saying, well, stop, wait, look what you, and probably what my professors have shown me too when I were working on a painting or something. I've told you, stop and look at that section. Just look at the beauty that you've made there. Now it may not be on the whole surface right now, but just stop and look at the possibilities you have there. And if I think about that, that's become an example of what life has been like right there.
Probably a little less impetuous. I still just kind of go out and do it. But I take stock of, of other people and, their needs and, yeah, man. It's hard to say like how you've changed, because people can pick it out, but like I said, you're living in this soup and you don't even realize, you don't realize that you're a totally different person. And you can see somebody that you haven't seen in years and they're like, man, you're so different, what have you been up to, I can't believe, you look this, you look that. But at the same time, then once you're with that person for a little while, you see right back to, the person I don't get to see my family all that often, but they know exactly what buttons to push, and, they know exactly, what to say to get a rise or get a smile, or, so we flux. We, sometimes we're different, sometimes we're the same. I think we're just this kind of crazy mash of stuff.
I think what stayed the same about me is that I tend to be a hard person to get to know. When I was growing up, I lived in a very small town, and because of that, anytime anything happened to you or your family, it sort of happened on a very public stage. And so I had things happen to me and things that happened to my family that were pretty traumatic, but you have to sort of live them with everyone else. Everyone else knows what's happening. Everyone else knows your business. And so my defense mechanism became, if they think you're okay, then you're okay. You know, and so I started to really do that. And that's something that I really don't like that I do. I put on this face of, I'm brave and I'm fine. And if everyone thinks that, then that will maybe be true, when in fact it's the exact opposite, that it's never fine. And so that's definitely something that I'm trying to change, but it's something that of myself I know that I'm doing it, and I'm trying really hard to not do it. As far as what's changed about myself, there's so many things. I mean, the biggest one is the life I have, and you know, the family that I'm making. Those things are, you know, things I didn't necessarily know I would have, think I would have, or necessarily thought I wanted for many years of my life. I was scared, because once you make those decisions, you have to invest yourself emotionally, and I'm bad at that. So that's definitely part of me that's changed. Probably one of the biggest parts of me that's changed.
I think for me, something that's stayed the same for me is my humility and compassion for others. I always found interest in everybody to a certain degree. There was something, the kid that nobody talked to, or something, the refugee in the class, where they come from, somebody from a different race. What is it all as children? How do we come together? And as you get older, it gets sometimes harder and harder to make these bonds with people, because you're working, you enter the workforce, and you're not around these people every day. So now you might be around other people in a job setting where you have interactions with people. But as an artist, you take a leap of faith, and you have to find a place to paint, and you paint, and you're working alone. So you go out into the community, whether to draw and have human connections. You may not talk to anybody, nobody may talk to you, but you're recording life as it comes to you. So what I think maybe has changed, it's more of the gaining of, what I like to use the word wisdom. And I think, you know, I've made mistakes, but for the most part I've been a wise man. That I always wanted to embrace, after reading about other artists and their lives, and you can see their work, the whole retrospect of their work and their life and what they worked at, and the definitions, and how long it took them to get to be who they really were. You know, we learn from other artists. Art doesn't come from a vacuum, and we learn from nature. I guess what's changed is the desire to want somebody else in my life who understands me and understands the work where I came from. And I have a lifetime of work that, you know, I can share with them and family or other people. So that's the change that I think.
I'm expressive. That can't change. I'm an expressor. I'm a communicator. But what changes is that form of expression has changed. And it continues to change depending on what I'm feeling called to, the venue that or the avenue, or the channel or the genre that I'm feeling called to express through. Sometimes it's mixed media sculptures, and it's not performative. It's really focusing on this is talking to me right now, and I'm going to continue to work on this 3D piece. And other times it's, I really need to express this through a song, so I write a song. Or it's, I really need to express this through movement, so I choreograph a structure and improvise inside of it. Or sometimes I'm working right now on choreographing a set piece, set to count, no improvisation, knowing from the beginning to the end exactly what movement I'm doing all the way through. So it's been fun to return to that.
Maybe because I'm reading about Jack Kerouac and his writing and all the beat imagery there, and how they exploded, right? And I love that, how they kind of broke through that, what was going on. But also de Kooning too. And then I think, well, geez, they're both men.
Bernini. That guy could draw. No, I've always loved his work.
Maybe it would be Amelia. Maybe it'd be a kid, because she is a happy baby. She's very happy, laughs constantly, but she also doesn't have any boundaries and barriers, no preconceived notions of anything, and that'd be kind of a cool experience to experience for just a little while.
This makes me think of Being John Malkovich, the film. I love that film! Especially Cameron Diaz, with her crazy frizzy hair and her geekiness. It's like, yes, thank you. Wow. The first person that comes to mind is David Lynch. I love his films. He also makes mixed media sculptures that are made with real flesh, and he documents the process of the decomposition.
Picasso. I guess I'm fascinated with Picasso's life more than anyone, because of his facilities and change and growth and, how would you say, inextinguishable passion and drive to continually create. Yeah, Picasso.
I think Michelle Obama. I would want to know what it would be, what it's like to be an incredibly accomplished woman, because her identity is so tied to her husband. What does that feel like at that level? This woman has a law degree, and her background is just so fascinating to me that I want to know from her, what is that like as a human?
I mean, there are lots of people I admire. I've read, novels and stories and biographies. I read this fantastic autobiography by this woman called Han Su-yen. Have you ever heard of her? You might have heard of one of the books that she wrote, because it was made into a Hollywood movie. It was called The Many Splendid Thing. Everybody's heard of it. But that's like the least of her works, because she has this 4-volume autobiography. I think she's no longer alive. That is just so amazing, to a life that was lived so intensely.
To be an artist is challenging, but if your soul wants to do it, keep going. Keep going.
If you are struggling in some aspect in what you want to create, find somebody who's done it. Ask them how they did it. Most of the time they will show you. It's pretty easy. And don't feel bad that you don't know how to do something, or that you're reaching out to, to learn something new or to get some help.
One bit of advice that I always do find giving my students, and I do practice this despite what I just said, that if I get stuck in a painting, if I get stuck with a work of art and it's not working, and I'm really disappointed with what I have, I always wreck it. Make a huge decision that totally ruins the painting. And then now I have a new set of problems to figure out, and so now I have to solve that big problem, and usually the painting resolves itself very quickly.
Stay true to yourself. I mean, stay true to your vision. What do you want to see? What do you want to express from either the situation or the reality that you're living?
To draw and draw and draw and draw and draw and develop your own handwriting and your language. But drawing is the most important, and the painting will follow, because painting is drawing with paint. But yes, I would tell people to understand light and understand art history and look at every master painting you possibly could.
I'm gonna steal the advice I give to so many of my students, which is running on a treadmill still counts as running. You're not going anywhere, you're not making progress. Go out into the world and you're gonna feel like you're not making progress. But all of those small things that happen to you are experiences, and life experience counts for a lot. So where you feel like you're stagnating most of the time, and I would say 99% of the time, you're not.
Keep showing up and keep doing the work, no matter how tired you are or how despondent. You just have to keep working so it can keep working you.